everyone, Heather here with PersephoneReturns.com, and today I am doing the first in a series of 3 tutorials that I'm going to be doing for this channel about astrocartography, which is the astrology of place. And so one of the things that I specialize in addition to psychological astrology, for those of you who are not familiar with me or my work, I do have a master's degree in clinical psychology, and a lot of the astrology that I do is deeply psychological. I also do predictions and transits and timing and electional and all these other different things. But another thing that people often come to me for, and something that I really enjoy doing and that I have sort of started to specialize in, is astrocartography and relocation astrology. And so I'm going to be doing a series of 3 videos about this topic, and I'm going to do them in the order in which I do these types of things in an astrocartography or relocation reading. And if you want to book a relocation reading with me, if you're planning a big trip or thinking about moving to a faraway destination and you want to know how your experience will be in this location and how this location and the energy of this location will affect you personally based on your unique astrology, you can always do that in the link below in the description of this video. And this first video is going to be about timing of a move. So the first thing I always do in a relocation reading is I look at the person's chart first and foremost, the natal chart, to see, because there are certain chart types that are more likely to move around a lot, and there are some that are likely to live far away from where they were born. There are some that are likely to move around constantly all over the place, time and time again. There are some that are likely to feel restless, but they don't want to leave their immediate environment. There are some that'll just completely do a complete upheaval and just completely, go away. And there are other types that are more likely to stay close to home, and they're less likely to make big moves unless there's a lot of energy in transits, progressions, and solar return that's sort of forcing their hand at that. And so I'm going to get into that, and then I'm going to talk about the most common transits that are associated with making a big move, especially like a big move to a different country or across the country. I consider it to be a long distance move when it's 200 miles or more, but even 100 miles can make a difference and shift your astrology just a little bit, just slightly, just enough to make a difference. And so if you're living in a place that has difficult astrology for you, something that you can consider doing if you've been having a lot of trouble since you moved to that place is getting an astrocartography reading, getting a relocation reading, and figuring out if the place that you're living in is not energetically compatible with your goals and desires, because that's another thing that's really important. And then in part 2 and 3 of this series, I'm going to look at the astrocartography map. So I'll show you the different lines that go through different places and what those all mean, and give you a feel for how to do it on your own, at least to a certain extent. And then I'm going to talk about the relocation chart and what that means. So for today, though, we are talking about the timing of a big move and how I see that in the chart. And so first and foremost, I look at people's charts to see if they're somebody who's likely to make a big move and make a big risk, or live somewhere far from where they were born or from where they've been living their entire lives. And the people that are most likely to move around a lot have certain things going on with their IC specifically, so the 4th house cusp. And so when you look at the 4th house cusp, the sign ruler, or the ruler of the 1st house cusp, or the 4th house cusp, and the sign ruler are very important in indicating if whether or not somebody should be, moving long distance or moving around a lot, if they should adopt a nomadic lifestyle. And one of the most common indicators that somebody moves around a lot is going to be Aquarius on the IC or Uranus on the IC or in the 4th house. That usually indicates feeling unsettled when you're stuck in the same environment day in and day out. If you don't move around a lot of times you're going to be somebody who rearranges furniture a lot, makes changes to their home a lot to switch up the energy, because there's this sort of dissatisfaction with things getting really stable in your home environment, and so that causes you to want to sort of do something to change it up a little bit. The other thing too that's really common with people who have Aquarius or Uranus on the IC is that if they didn't move around a lot in childhood, they found their family to be unusual for one reason or another, and so their experience is that their family was different from other families. That's something else that's a really common expression. Even that they might feel that their parents were kind of weird or strange or eccentric in some sort of way, but they could have moved around a lot in childhood. If you didn't move around a lot in childhood, you might actually do that more so in adulthood, because your parents' charts influence where you're going to be living in childhood as well, because you are a family unit and they're making the decisions. And so people who have Aquarius on the IC are the best nomads. So they're the people that can do really well just picking up, leaving, going to a different place. Usually the relocations that happen are very abrupt and very unexpected. It's like out of nowhere, all of a sudden I'm moving again. And that's sort of the nature of having Aquarius on the IC. And again, if you don't do that, usually rearranging your furniture, like changing things about your home environment, that's a good release and outlet for that energy. And it still needs to be triggered. That IC, that energy needs to be triggered in order for you to make that big move, which we'll get into. The other other indicators on the IC are Sagittarius on the IC. I've noticed usually at least once in your lifetime, if you have Sagittarius on the IC or Jupiter in the 4th house, or especially conjunct the IC, you might move to a foreign country, especially just at least once in your lifetime. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be living abroad and traveling and living in a bunch of different foreign countries all the time. You might, especially if there's other indicators in there, but usually at least once you'll at least try to experience living in a foreign country. And sometimes you might not be provided that opportunity. It really depends on your personal circumstances, the other things in your chart, the transits going on, but more times than not, it'll come up at some point and there's a yearning to do that anyway. The other thing is Rahu Ketu, the north and south node in the 10th and the 4th house axis. This definitely indicates that you'll probably live as an adult far away from your hometown or from where you grew up or from where your parents live. And so that's actually advisable when you have Rahu Ketu, the north and south node in the 10th and the 4th house. Traditionally, they say that you should live at least 200 miles from where you were born, right, to switch up the energy enough. You should not live close to home with this sort of energy. And so people who have Rahu Ketu in the 10th and 4th house, they tend to have at least one big move, and the major changes and upheavals and transformations in their lives when your life completely changes path, that has to do a lot of times with your location and also your career, obviously, because the 10th house is the house of career and public reputation. That's implicated as well. And so changes in both of these areas bring huge transformations and changes in your life path. And so that's just the nature of having this. And if you have more than one of these indications in your chart, that's like for sure you're going to be moving around, and you're going to live farther from home, and you might want to get a feel for what the best locations are for you, because you're probably not going to stick around in one place for very long. The other thing too is that Aries on the 4th house cusp, or Aries on the IC, or Mars in the 4th house, has an easy time just getting up and leaving, so they're more likely to move as well. It's not necessarily indicated that they will live far away from home, but they have an easier time letting go of their place of living, moving around, just up and leaving, and they tend to do it very abruptly, impulsively, and they have a hard time sitting still when they're at home. And so that's one of the ways that they sort of release that energy. It's a good outlet for it, is to up and leave, move somewhere else, right? And so Aries, Mars people in the 4th house, they tend to have an easier time moving and relocating. The other thing too is that Scorpio on the IC. Scorpio on the IC will hold on to their home environment until it's completely unbearable. So they'll make a big move in order to sort of purge and leave a difficult past behind, especially as it relates to their family, their home, their immediate environment, the people that they care about most. So if they go through some sort of traumatic experience, if things get really intense and they need to change up that energy, they will hold on, and then they will just purge it all, leave it all behind, and completely, rebuild from the ground up when it comes to that foundation that their home and their family environment provides for them in that area. And especially Pluto in the 4th house, it usually indicates a very intense childhood experience. And so usually they don't want to live super close to home. They might, because they feel obligated, or they want to be like loyal, right? Because there's an aspect of loyalty that goes along with that. But a lot of times they will end up distancing themselves. The other sign that's likely to move around a lot is Gemini on the IC. Gemini on the IC is a little different though. They tend to move around a lot within their immediate environment, so within their own like neighborhood, or they won't move within farther than a few cities away. Like they'll usually stay close to home, but they'll move around a lot because they get sort of this unsettled energy. So Gemini they get bored with staying in the same place, but they don't want to go too far. And again, this can change if there's other indications in the chart, but that's sort of the nature of having Gemini on the IC in general. The most likely to stay put and stay in one spot for your entire life, the people that stay and they live in their hometown forever, or maybe they just move once and then they stay in that spot and they live out most of their lives in one location. These are going to be Taurus on the IC, Cancer on the IC, Moon in the 4th house people, especially if the Moon is in Cancer or Taurus, right? And to a lesser extent, Capricorn will, you know, move if it's responsible to do so, and if they're obligated in some sort of way. But Capricorn is a more stable sort of IC as well, so they tend to not move around quite as much. And again, this is very general. It also depends on what the ruler of the IC is doing, which is, you know, beyond the scope of what I can cover in a simple short video. I might do another one on that. And also the moon. So the moon is a little bit different than the IC. The moon, when I'm looking at relocation, a lot of times it indicates what people like yearn for, but they don't get to have it right away, and sometimes it'll get activated and sometimes it won't. And so an example of this is that I see a lot of people who have moon in Sagittarius, unless it's doing something else or there's other indications in the chart, they want to have these adventures. They want to live in a foreign country, but they don't always get to do that. And so that's kind of an interesting thing that I've seen. The other thing is like moon in Aquarius, right? You might think that they would move around a lot. They might, but it's not necessarily that they're going to have a big upheaval or like a crazy move that's like across the country or someplace far away necessarily. It just means that they feel sort of unsettled in their home and family environment, and sometimes they need to change things up. But it's more of an emotional influence with the moon, as opposed to the fourth house is more literal, like to the context of your home, right, and your immediate environment where you live, your place of living. And so, but they both have indications. So all the things that I said for the IC, they're applicable to the moon as well, but I would say to a lesser extent. And so that's kind of what's going on in terms of the people that are most likely to make a big move and who do best with these types of things. And we can get into another one about people who travel and things like that too, but you know, that's kind of going to be a similar energy. It's just going to be placed a little bit differently with a lot of Aquarius or Sagittarius or, you know, 9th house energy, things of that nature. Let's get into timing, right? Because timing is really important when it comes to a big move. If you really want to move and you really want to have that upheaval, but the energy's not there in your chart, it might be delayed, right? You might feel like it needs to happen, but the universe, the astrology, the planets are like, you need to hold on. And so you might find yourself coming into these blockages of getting out of where you are right now, and you might not see that there's an end in sight, but if you look at the astrology timing, you'll get a better indicator. So the first thing I always do is if I know where the person's going to be living for the rest of the remainder of this year that they're in the current time, I look at their solar return, because the solar return will verify what the transits are doing. There has to be usually more than one indicator for it to be a significant move, like across the country or to a different country or someplace that's really far away where it's a big upheaval. There usually needs to be more than one indicator, but if there's a strong indicator with a certain planetary placement in transit, that can do it as well. So like, for example, Uranus brings change, it brings transformation, it brings upheaval. Oh, the sunset's getting pretty back there, guys. I don't know if you can see it very well on this camera. I need to get a better one. But anyway, so Uranus transits to the moon, the IC, the ruler of the IC, or conjunct planets in the 4th house. That is the biggest indicator that there is going to be a big move coming, and it's going to be a big change, a drastic, dramatic change, even if you don't think it's going to happen, because you have your moon in the 4th house in Taurus or something like that. I have a friend who, she'll probably watch this, but she is having Uranus conjunct her moon right now, and I told her over a year ago, you're going to move in July of 2018. She's like, no, I'm not. I think I'm going to stay around for a little bit longer. And it's July and she's moving, right? And it's a big change for her. So these things will happen. Uranus conjunct the moon is a huge indicator that something significant will change in your home and family environment. A lot of times it will be a move. And you'll know if it's going to be a move if there's other indicators as well, right? And so the other thing too for timing is going to be when these Uranus transits come exact, or when they're activated by smaller short-term transits like a Mercury or a Mars or something, that can sort of activate it. But another thing too is eclipses. If you also have eclipses going on, or even just standalone eclipses that are in a really, really tight alignment with any of your personal planets, but especially the moon, the IC, right, or the planets in the 4th house, or the ruler of the 4th house, this can indicate a big, major transformational move that changes your path, changes your direction in life. And so this is going to be a very significant event in your life that's going to completely throw you in a new direction. And it might be turbulent, it might be chaotic, just like the Uranus ones can be. Uranus in trine, conjunction, all of this, it's going to be sort of abrupt, right? It's going to be unexpected. Eclipses do the same thing, and it's usually a life-changing experience where you were headed in one direction and this eclipse caused you to move for whatever reason due to some sort of extenuating circumstances, and you did it, and your life is forever changed, you know, and your path has changed. And usually you look back on it, you're like, wow, I'm actually glad that happened because I was going in the wrong direction, and now look what I'm doing, right? So eclipses can do this as well. The other thing too, in terms of transits to look at, sometimes Saturn in the 4th house, conjunct the IC, conjunct the moon, can bring a move. Usually it's not as fun. It's usually because you're downsizing or you have to take on a greater responsibility. Maybe there's an addition to the family via like a new child being born, or which can be fun, right? But the logistics and the responsibility and the having to sort of change your home environment to adapt to this, it can be a little bit more tedious and a lot more work, especially when Saturn's involved. The other thing I've seen too, Saturn is like the grandparent, right? And so Saturn can indicate having to take care of a parent or a grandparent or an in-law, and so having to adapt your home and living situation because of this, which can, you know, in turn cause some sort of move to happen. The other thing too that I've seen is Neptune. Neptune on the IC. This can cause a move that occurs due to confusion, due to loss of some sort involving your family. It dissolves the family unit, right? And so the dissolving of the family unit can lead to the dissolving of the structure of your very physical home environment where your place of living is. And so you can find yourself kind of drifting and moving about and not really sure how to get your feet on solid ground when it comes to your home and living situation when you have Neptune conjunct the IC. So I've seen that instigate a move. It's usually also in connection with another transit or with some sort of strong solar return energy in the 4th house, but it does happen. The other thing too is Pluto. Pluto is a big one. It sometimes brings a move. Usually Pluto is more of an internal process where you're learning to change and adapt and transform your idea of family and what that means to you. But a lot of times that can accompany a very physical transformation and change to your place of living, your home environment, and especially I see this with children whose parents are going through a divorce. A lot of times when people come to me to look at their child's chart, it is because they are going through a divorce and they're worried about the effects on their children. It usually will show up on the IC when this occurs, especially if it's a very difficult, messy divorce and there's a lot of change going on. And so it can bring a move due to divorce, due to a crisis in the family, sometimes due to death or loss, or it just could be because you need a change, you need to transform. This is part of the transformational process for you. Maybe it's that purge energy that I talked about that happens with people who have Scorpio on the IC or Pluto in the 4th house, and these types of things can very much bring about a big move, right? And so usually it's because you're trying to leave the past behind. You need to change, you need to surrender, you need to let go of something, and you need that big purge, that big upheaval in order to release that energy and to break free. And so a lot of times Pluto can bring that. And Pluto, you know, in a conjunction, a square, some sort of aspect with the moon can do a similar thing. It usually is a little bit it's a little bit less, it's not as dramatic in terms of like the change in location. That's more, again, on an emotional level. It's how you're feeling when Pluto is in an aspect with the moon, but it can stimulate some sort of move. Same thing with Neptune. You know, it's not just on the IC, it can be conjunct the moon, it can be conjunct the ruler of the 4th house, it can be squaring the IC. So different alignments with these planets. I specifically look at the IC, the moon, planets in the 4th house, and also, of course, the ruler of the 4th house. And so outer planet transits to these areas are the most common indicators of a big move. There are other things, again, like solar return. A solar return chart alone that shows a bunch of planets in the 4th house doesn't necessarily mean you're going to move. It has to really be supported by transits as well. Same thing with progressions. If you look at, I look at the progressed moon primarily when I do look at progressions. It's sort of my third verification, especially if I don't have access to their current location for the solar return. And, you know, the moon conjunct the IC can bring changes in the home and family unit. The moon conjunct the moon even, or the moon conjunct the ruler of the IC. Like, these things can happen, but there really has to be something backing it up, because the progressed chart is more of an internal chart. It's like a lunar chart, right? So it shows your subjective experience, which sometimes can manifest objectively, especially if there's something backing that in your transits. With transits are more objective. But anyway, I hope that you found this helpful and useful. I'm losing light here, so I'm going to end this here. My next video will be about relocation and astrocartography, which is a map where it puts all these different lines for all of your planets. Everybody has their own planetary map, and so I'll break that down for you next time, probably at my computer, so I can share my screen and show you what we're doing. And if you found this video helpful and you want to see more, you can subscribe to my channel at the link, or at the button below, the red button. And you can always contact me via email. The email address is in the description below. Or, of course, you can reach out to me for a reading. The link is also in the description. And thank you so much for watching. And if you like this type of video and you want to see me to do more tutorials and things like that, please comment below. I'm always open to suggestions for different video topics and things like that. All right, thank you all so much. I'll see you next time. Bye.